The Battle of Geonosis, often remembered as the conflict that launched the Clone Wars, is painted in galactic history as a pivotal moment of heroism and tragedy. However, beneath the surface lies a far darker narrative, woven with manipulation, deception, and the shadowy machinations of individuals whose ambitions went far beyond the battlefield. To truly understand the depth of this battle's significance, one must peer past the explosions and carnage and into the web of intrigue spun by its architects. The Republic's intervention on Geonosis was ostensibly to rescue Jedi Knights and thwart the Confederacy of Independent Systems' growing droid army. But this perspective, widely disseminated in the aftermath, was only a fragment of the larger, sinister truth. The Jedi, bastions of peace and guardians of the Republic, found themselves drawn into a conflict orchestrated not by their own decisions, but by the manipulations of a single-man Chancellor Palpatine, whose guise as a benevolent leader concealed his identity as Darth Sidious, the Dark Lord of the Sith. The events leading to the battle were carefully choreographed. Count Dooku, a former Jedi-turned-Sith apprentice, had been dispatched by Sidious to rally discontented star systems under the Separatist banner. Dooku was not merely a rogue actor, he was a key figure in Sidious' grand design, ensuring that the galaxy's divisions deepened and tensions escalated. The Geonosian assembly lines, constructing a droid army on an industrial scale, were part of this plan, offering a tangible threat that the Republic could not ignore. The revelation of these factories, ostensibly through intelligence leaks, was no accident, it was bait. The Jedi Order, unknowing pawns in the scheme, responded to the distress call from Geonosis with an almost desperate sense of duty. Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Padme Amidala's capture by the Separatists provided the perfect pretext for the Republic's intervention. This was not merely a rescue mission, but an opportunity for the Jedi to display their resolve in the face of growing Separatist aggression. Yet, as the Jedi Council deployed a team to Geonosis, they failed to see the larger trap. By setting foot on that arid, dust-choked planet, they walked into a confrontation designed to weaken their ranks, test the Republic's newfound military might, and solidify the narrative that would justify years of bloodshed. The arrival of the Grand Army of the Republic, comprised of genetically engineered clone soldiers, was a moment of shock and revelation. Until that point, the clones were a mystery, a military force born of secrecy. Commissioned by the enigmatic Jedi Master Sifo Dyas, or so the records claimed, the army was a product of Kaminoan craftsmanship and Sith manipulation. Palpatine's orchestration of this event, and his ability to present the clone army as the Republic's salvation, was a masterstroke. The Senate, already paralyzed by fear and division, welcomed the emergence of this military force with open arms. Few paused to consider the moral or political implications of utilizing an army bred for war. The battle itself was chaos incarnate. Thousands of Jedi ignited their lightsabers on Geonosis' harsh terrain, engaging wave after wave of Separatist droids. The clones, efficient and disciplined, carried out their orders with cold precision. Geonosis became a slaughterhouse, its rocky plain stained with the lifeblood of soldiers, Jedi, and droids alike. From the towering spires of Geonosian architecture to the subterranean caverns where their hives lay, destruction was rampant. But even as the Republic celebrated its Pyrrhic victory, claiming to have struck a decisive blow against the Separatists, the reality was far grimmer. Dooku's escape at the battle's conclusion revealed much of the darker truth to the Jedi, though they struggled to comprehend its full extent. His mention of a Sith Lord controlling the Republic was dismissed by many as a ploy to sow discord, but it was a rare moment of truth from a man whose role as both adversary and victim of Sidious' plan was more complex than many realized. Dooku, for all his charisma and power, was not the architect of the Clone Wars. He was a pawn, elevated to prominence by Sidious to further the Sith's ultimate aim, the destruction of the Jedi and the subjugation of the galaxy under Sith rule. What made the battle particularly harrowing was its lasting impact on the Jedi Order. Known for their reliance on wisdom and diplomacy, the Jedi found themselves thrust into a role they were ill-prepared to embrace: generals in a galactic war. Geonosis marked the beginning of this transformation, a shift from peacekeepers to warriors. This new role not only strained their connection to the Force, but also positioned them as enforcers of a political regime increasingly dominated by Palpatine. The Jedi's presence on Geonosis was not a triumph of their ideals, but a betrayal of them. forcing them to participate in a conflict where their moral clarity was clouded and their purpose subverted. The clone army itself was another dark element of the battle's legacy. Though they fought valiantly alongside the Jedi, the clones were ultimately an instrument of Palpatine's will. Programmed with genetic inhibitors and bred for loyalty, they were an embodiment of the Sith's ability to corrupt and weaponize life itself. The Jedi, who had accepted the clones as allies, would one day face their betrayal in the form of Order 66, a contingency plan that would see the clones turn on their Jedi commanders without hesitation. Geonosis also set the tone for the war that followed. Far from uniting the galaxy, the Clone Wars deepened its divisions, pitting friends and neighbors against one another in a cycle of violence that enriched war profiteers and drained the Republic's resources. Each skirmish, each battle, was a step closer to Palpatine's ultimate goal. The Senate, consumed by fear and paranoia, gradually ceded more power to the Chancellor, unwittingly laying the foundation for the Empire. This sinister manipulation was not confined to the grand stage of galactic politics, but was evident in the personal struggles of those involved. Anakin Skywalker, who had already begun his journey toward the dark side, was profoundly affected by the events on Geonosis. The slaughter of the Geonosian warriors, coupled with the loss of Jedi comrades, further fueled the anger and pain that Sidious would later exploit. For Anakin, Geonosis was not just a battle, it was a crucible that hardened his heart and set him on a path of destruction. The battle also marked the Republic's descent into a state of perpetual war. Far from resolving the tensions with the Separatists, it escalated them. The conflict became a self-sustaining machine, with both sides locked in a deadly dance orchestrated by Sidious. The casualties, both military and civilian, mounted as the galaxy burned, yet few questioned the necessity of the war. By the time the truth behind the Battle of Geonosis and its orchestrators came to light, it was too late to undo the damage. The Republic was gone, replaced by the Empire, and the Jedi were reduced to myth and legend. Thus, the Battle of Geonosis was not merely a military engagement, but a dark milestone in galactic history. It was a carefully engineered spectacle of destruction, a harbinger of the Clone Wars, and a turning point for the Republic and the Jedi Order. The truths it revealed, and those it concealed, served as the foundation for the galaxy's transformation into an empire ruled by fear and oppression. Even now, the echoes of that fateful battle can be felt, a reminder of how easily noble ideals can be twisted and how deeply the seeds of darkness can take root. The dark truths of the Battle of Geonosis extend beyond even the political manipulation and existential crisis it imposed on the galaxy. It revealed the fragility of institutions that had stood for millennia and exposed the moral compromises inherent in warfare. As the Republic transitioned from a democracy to an authoritarian regime under the guise of security and survival, the galaxy witnessed the erosion of its foundational principles, and nowhere was this clearer than in the events stemming from that fateful conflict. The Jedi Order, once revered as paragons of virtue and impartial guardians of peace, began to fracture under the weight of their new role. The battle thrust them into a position they had long sought to avoid: entanglement in the politics of war. The Jedi Code, which emphasized restraint, diplomacy, and avoidance of attachment, was increasingly at odds with their responsibilities as generals in the Clone Wars. Each decision they made, each life they were forced to take, further eroded their connection to the Force and sowed seeds of doubt among their ranks. Geonosis, the spark that ignited this transformation, highlighted the Jedi's unintentional complicity in the Republic's fall. Though they believed they were defending democracy, their actions were twisted into justification for the centralization of power under Palpatine. The Jedi, unaware of the true nature of their foe, became an unwitting extension of his will. By taking command of the clone army and committing themselves to the war effort, they placed themselves in a vulnerable position strategically, ethically, and spiritually. On the battlefield, the clones and Jedi fought side by side, creating an illusion of camaraderie and unity. However, this partnership was inherently flawed, built on foundations of manipulation and secrecy. The clones were not just soldiers, they were weapons designed to serve a singular purpose. The Jedi, despite their wisdom, failed to see the trap being laid for them. They formed bonds with their clone commanders, trusted them implicitly, and leaned on their support during the grueling campaigns of the war. This trust would later prove their undoing when Order 66 was enacted, revealing the ultimate betrayal baked into the clones' very existence. Count Dooku's role in the battle and the larger war effort adds another layer of darkness to the narrative. Though he embraced the Sith teachings and played his part as Sidious's apprentice, Dooku harbored his own ambitions. He sought to reshape the galaxy in his image, believing that the Republic's corruption justified his actions. Yet Dooku himself was ensnared in Sidious's web, a pawn in a game he could never hope to control. His actions on Geonosis, from orchestrating the capture of Obi-Wan and Anakin to sparking the Jedi's intervention, were all part of a grander plan he only partially understood. The Geonosians themselves, native to the planet and builders of the Separatist droid army, were another casualty of this grand design. Their society, hive-like and industrious, became a tool in the Sith's scheme. The Geonosians were not participants in this war by choice, but were manipulated and exploited by the Separatists. When the Republic's forces unleashed their might on Geonosis, the planet's population suffered immense losses. The survivors of the initial battle faced further devastation in the years that followed, as the planet became a strategic target in the Clone Wars. By the time the conflict ended, Geonosis was left a barren husk, its people and culture decimated. The legacy of the Battle of Geonosis is a haunting reminder of how easily moral clarity can be lost in the fog of war. For the Republic, it marked the beginning of its transformation into the Empire, as the ideals of liberty and justice were eroded in the name of security. For the Jedi, it signaled the start of their downfall, as they became increasingly embroiled in a war that was antithetical to their purpose. And for the galaxy at large, it was a prelude to an era of darkness, one in which hope was extinguished and oppression reigned supreme. In the years following the battle, as the Clone Wars raged across the galaxy, the truths of Geonosis became obscured by propaganda and the relentless march of conflict. The Republic celebrated its victory, while the Separatists used the battle as a rallying cry to galvanize their movement. Both sides painted themselves as defenders of freedom and justice, but the reality was far more cynical. The war was never about ideals, it was a tool of the Sith, a means to an end. The suffering it caused, the lives it claimed, and the destruction it wrought were all by design. The Jedi, despite their best efforts, could not prevent the tides of war from engulfing them. As their numbers dwindled and their influence waned, they became increasingly isolated, their warnings dismissed by a Senate under Palpatine's control. By the time the true nature of the Sith's plan was revealed, the Jedi were powerless to stop it. The Empire's rise was inevitable, and the Jedi Order, weakened and scattered, was all but destroyed. Geonosis was the beginning of this tragic story, a battle that symbolized the manipulation and corruption at the heart of the Clone Wars. It was a moment when heroes were turned into instruments of destruction, when ideals were sacrificed for expediency, and when the galaxy's descent into darkness became irreversible. Though the Battle of Geonosis is often remembered for its spectacle and significance as the first major conflict of the Clone Wars, its true legacy lies in the shadows it cast over the galaxy and the lessons it holds about the dangers of manipulation, fear, and unchecked power. As the years passed and the events of the Clone Wars faded into history, the dark truths of Geonosis were largely forgotten. The Empire, in its dominance, ensured that the official narrative painted the Republic's actions in a favorable light. The Jedi, demonized and hunted, became scapegoats for the galaxy's suffering. And the Sith, who had orchestrated the entire conflict, stood triumphant, their machinations hidden beneath layers of deception. Yet, for those who seek to understand the true nature of the galaxy's transformation, the Battle of Geonosis remains a key moment. It is a reminder of how fragile peace can be, how easily power can corrupt, and how the actions of a few can shape the destiny of billions. In the end, the battle was not just a fight for control of a single planet, but a turning point that reshaped the galaxy forever.